Mono white, the age-old topic among many Commander players. But what will it take for this single color to be able to compete with the rest? Let's talk about that. What is up, Commander players? My name is Matt, and you're watching Top Commander. So, on today's episode, I kind of was doing a little thinking about a couple of the Boros / mono white decks that I have and what they are really lacking. And I may have come up with a solution. But before we get into that, if you wish to support this channel, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to support this channel directly, be sure to visit patreon.com/TopCommander. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and find out what's going on. So, mono white has been the butt of every joke. It's been the topic of discussion for Commander players for quite some time. It's just not cutting it. There are only a handful of mono white Commander decks that do good. But what is it that's making them do so well? For instance, SRAM, Senior Edificer. This is a mono white, typically it's a Voltron commander that runs a lot of auras and equipment and vehicles. But it runs just fine. I mean, the commander comes out on turn 2. You don't really have to ramp that much. You start dropping start dropping equipment and auras, and it lets you cantrip. So every time you play a card, you're drawing a card. So you're typically always hitting your land drops because you have such a mass amount of these auras, equipments, and vehicles. Typically, you're probably not playing a whole lot of vehicles in this deck. I think my SRAM deck only runs Smuggler's Copter, Weatherlight, and Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. But that's neither here nor there. This is not deck tech. We're trying to figure out what's making this deck work. The fact that every card, when you play it, you're drawing a card. And then some of these cards have the magic word in it that says whenever it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Maybe there's something there. Let's look at Boros. There's been a couple of Boros commanders recently that are actually not terrible. For instance, Feather the Redeemed. Granted, this one came out back in War of the Spark, but Feather the Redeemed was a really great Boros commander because you target it with a bunch of cantrippy, just combat tricks. When you're targeting your card with something like Renegade Tactics, so you spend the red, you cast it, you're targeting your card, you're drawing a card because of Renegade Tactics ability, and then Feather would exile the card and then put it back in your hand, making your cantrip combat trick cards reusable, effectively turning them into card draw. Again, I think we're getting somewhere. Another recent Boros commander that I feel actually was doing pretty decent. It wasn't the best. It was very situational. But Akiri, Fearless Voyager, recently came out in Zendikar Rising. I feel like this was a step in the right direction for Boros especially, because typical Boros strategies are very swingy. You want to do a lot of attacking. And Akiri allows you to turn your attacks into card draw. Granted, you have to be equipped. You have to run equipment. But is that a bad thing? Because if you look at a lot of white and red cards, there's a good bit of artifact synergy. And especially on white, a lot of the effects in white that search out artifacts, they're typically searching out equipment, such as Steel Shaper's Gift, Open the Armory, Relic Seeker, Stoneforge Mystic. There's a lot of stuff dealing with equipment. So is Boros just strictly going to be better off as an equipment style deck? Or mono white is going to be better off running a bunch of equipment and auras like SRAM, Senior Edificer. Is this the direction that we need to go in? Because a SRAM deck does pretty good on its own, especially because if you run a good mix of equipment and auras, you can run Pure Steel Paladin, which also draws you a card when you play an equipment. And then there's a white creature such as like Mesa Enchantress. Whenever you cast an enchantment, you get to draw a card, turning all of your stuff into cantrips. It was just something that I was thinking about as far as other mono white commanders that people probably want to build around, but are having a hard time trying to get them to work because of the things that mono white and Boros are lacking in for a lot of their stuff. Now, another recent one, very, very recent, was actually in Commander Legends. Well, not in the main set. It was the Commander Legends Commander Precon that came with it. Which was, I believe it's called Wylith. So whenever it attacks, you get to draw a card for each aura or equipment attached to it. Making it a Voltron commander in Boros, but Akiri went a slightly different direction where you want to get like 3 creatures on the field, all 3 of them be equipped, and each one attacks a different opponent. And then you got your card draw that way. But it's still a way for Boros and Mono White to get card draw. But why do they not have any cards themselves that specifically let them draw cards on a consistent basis? A lot of people thought that the biggest issue with Mono White and Boros is ramp. They need better ramp. I honestly don't think they need better ramp, because among all of the mana rocks that they can already use, because they can be used in all these decks, Boros has the Signet, there's a Talisman, there's all the Key Runes, Clue Stones. Granted, those are 3-drops, but trust me, some of those decks actually want those still. But when you're looking at all the different Felwar Stone, Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, if you have the money, of course, Mana Crypt. I specifically added that one. If you have the money, yes, I know it's expensive and it's a little bit outside of... I know it's outside of a lot of people's budget range. But really, I want to take a look for a second here at some of the just mono white ramp. An oldie buddy goodie, Knight of the White Orchid. He's double white for a 2/2 with first strike, and fetches up a plains whenever he ETBs, if your opponent has more lands than you. Is that really a downside though? Not really, because a lot of green players, a lot of green decks are ramping like crazy and they have better land-based ramp. So white being able to keep up in the fact that, oh, well, you have more lands than me, so I'm going to go and get a land as well. Another example, I believe this one was from the 2020 Precons. I believe this was in the Mardu Precon deck. Verge Rangers. 3 mana with first strike. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. As long as an opponent controls more lands than you, you may play lands from the top of your library. Again, and the odd thing about this is this kind of really made me think of like a Oracle of Moldiah or a Zuza kind of effect. I'm not sure. I think it was more Oracle sounding to me. But the fact that this ability is in mono white, I mean... And this one just lets you play lands. It doesn't have to be plains. Commander Legends just came out with a new one. Keeper of the Accord. 3 and a white for a 3/4 At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 soldier creature token. Not bad. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you, you may search your library for basic planes, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. If you haven't seen the Game Nights recently, the Commander Legends Game Nights episode, this card does some work. In fact, at one point, there is 2 landfall decks at the table, and this is being played with a Boros deck. The Boros deck at one point had more lands than the landfall deck because of this card, because it triggers on each opponent's end step. The game was absolutely amazing, but I digress. How many more cards does White need to... How many better ramp cards does White really need? We still have Core Cartographer. This is another oldie but a goodie. It's been reprinted a lot recently, actually. I believe it was reprinted in one of the precons recently, and also again in the Commander Legends precon. I mean, this card is being reprinted, and I believe it also got reprinted in Jumpstart, even though I know it's been hard to find Jumpstart. I don't know if they're going to come out with another print run of those. I know it's been difficult to find. I have not been able to get hold of any of that. But Core Cartographer searches up planes, puts it in the battlefield, tapped, when it ETBs. It is 4 mana. It's basically a Solemn Simulacrum, 4 mono white. Or, well, it searches up a plane, so I guess it could be for Orzhov, you could get a Godless Shrine, or in Boros, you could get a Sacred Foundry. Cartographer's Hawk. 1 and a white for a 2/1 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, return it to its owner's hand. If you do, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Alright, so this one, there was a lot of mixed feelings about this, but let me break it down as to why this works as a card design. You have to deal combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you. It's also a 2-drop, 2/1 flyer. Most of your land-based ramp is in green. This was designed as, oh, you're playing against a green player. Play out a Cartographer's Hawk, start flying them and poking them for 2 in the air, because green has a little bit of a hard time dealing with flyers. And short of having a bunch of, a massive amount of reach creatures, green doesn't fly. You see where this is going. That's why this card was designed. That's why this card is good. Is it designed to go in and swing at a blue-white flyer deck? No. That's not what this is. Could it go in a blue-white flyer deck? Absolutely. This is what I'm talking about, though. Even back in 2018, we had a ramp card in white that most people, I feel like they just neglected it. Boreas Charger is 2 and a white for a 2/1 flying Pegasus. Whenever Boreas Charger leaves the battlefield, choose an opponent who controls more lands than you. Search your library for a number of planes equal to the difference and reveal them. You put 1 of them onto the battlefield tapped and the rest into your hand. So if they control 2 more lands than you, you get to search for 2 lands, put 1 into the battlefield. You basically cultivate when this thing leaves the battlefield, give or take. There's a reason why this card is, again, good. Now, of course, this was designed for the Aminatou, the Fate Shifter precon back in 2018, so you can just blink it, and of course, every time it blinks out, you get a new land. Now, it was specifically for planes, but I still like this card even in mono white because it's another flyer. So, these are cards that search up planes. Let's not forget to mention that there's still cards like Sword of the Animus, where every time the equipped creature attacks, you get to search for a land, put it into play tapped. Burnished Heart. It's a 3-drop artifact creature that you pay 3 in second, and you get 2 basic lands. So this is, again, white ramp. Then, of course, speaking of Solemn Simulacrum, he's also white ramp, technically. He's 4-drop, and he gets a basic, so you go get a plains. Wayfarer's Bauble. You play it for 1, pay 2, sacrifice it, and then you get a basic land into play tapped. Is the problem with white needing card draw? Or needing ramp? Because I honestly don't feel like white needs more ramp. I feel like white needs a way to get to the ramp. Going back to a couple of the recent cards, I feel like white needs more card draw. Well, maybe not necessarily card draw. Because leave it to blue to do all the card draw shenanigans. They have all that. Blue does literal everything at this point, and white is left in the wayside. Why doesn't white have something like Preordain? Or Ponder? Or I'll even go as far as to say they could use a card like Tolarian Winds. Why is that not outside of white's... Why is that considered to be outside of white's color pie? If you look at white's removal, Path to Exile. Exile a target creature. Its controller can search for a basic land and put it into play tapped. Okay. Swords to Plowshares. Exile the target creature. They gain life equal to the creature's power or toughness. I can't remember which one that one was. I believe it's based on the power. So, I'm going to take your thing away, but I'm going to give you something in return. That sounds very much like what white should be able to do with its card draw. Like a Tolarian Winds. Tolarian Winds is a blue mana instant that's 1 in a blue, you discard your hand, and you draw that many cards. Now, remember, you have to expend a card to use this effect, because you have to use the Tolarian Winds. Tolarian Winds doesn't count itself in that. So you play Tolarian Winds. Let's say you have 3 other cards in your hand. You discard 3, you draw 3. You give something to get something. It would work the same as white's removal. How, I'm going to kill this thing, but I'm going to give you something back in return. Because white's removal does that all the time. If you look at it, even Generous Gift, it's basically the white Beast Within, which, of course, a lot of people thought that Beast Within should have been a white card to begin with. Destroy something and give them a 3/3 elephant. Okay. So, why can't they have card draw effects like that? Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Would that put white in the realm of needing wheel effects or cantrip effects? I argue the point for Tolarian Winds, and really, if you think about it, Boros has a Tolarian Winds with Heartwarming Redemption. Granted, I believe it's 4 mana to play it, but you discard your hand and draw that many +1. That's in Boros. So why is it that mono white doesn't get anything like that? Maybe Boros should get more of these slightly worse wheel effects, while mono white should get more cantrip effects like Ponder, Preordain. Because let's face it, blue's gotten so many cantrips, it's drilled it into the ground with Serum Visions, Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm, Scour All Possibilities. Yeah. Scour All Possibilities. Just this massive amount of cantrips that blue has. Why does white not get any of that? Because I feel like the problem is not white's ramp at this point. The problem is white needs a way to get to the ramp. Do they need straight up card draw? Do they need a 3 mana draw 2? Probably not. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go as far as saying white needs that. I feel like more of what cantrips are, or like Tolarian Winds, where you're having to give up something, but you get something back. That's what cantrips are. You expend a card, but it replaces itself, so you get something out of it. That sounds like what White's card draw, or what White's removal does. So why doesn't White's card draw have something like that? Discard your hand, draw that many cards? That actually sounds like White would get way more support if we had more effects like that. Maybe I'm just thinking this over. Maybe this is just a wrong thought. Maybe what I'm thinking is outside of White's color pie. But really, what is the color pie anymore? Because blue literally does everything. But I feel like there's some things that blue should not be able to do. Blue should not be able to exile. Blue is supposed to bounce creatures, not destroy or exile. But they've gotten like 4 cards recently that let them do all the above. I feel like at this point there needs to be an overhaul to the color pie a little bit. The color pie seems to be all over the place. White's being left alone, and blue's getting to do everything. And at this point, also green is getting to do everything. Black only gets to do what it typically does, and tutor again, and tutor some more, opposition agent. But like, green has started to get way better card draw. Blue has started getting better removal. Like, what is going on with the color pie recently? I feel like something is going on that I'm missing. I feel like Reality Shift should have been a white card. 2 mana, exile a creature, and then the owner can manifest the top card. Why is that not white? It's just one of those things where it's like, what is going on? Why is it that white can do this, but they can't do this? They can do that, but they can't do that. Oh, well, white's card advantage is in board wipes. I don't think that's good enough. That's not good enough. And not to mention, a lot of people don't run that many board wipes anymore. People don't run 5 board wipes in a deck, typically. People are running maybe 3. From what I've seen. I don't see a lot of board wipes hit the field. I see Toxic Deluge, Cyclonic Rift, and Vandal Blast. That's typically all I see. I don't see a whole lot of other board wipe effects. But maybe this is just a weird tangent. Maybe this was a weird thought. Maybe I'm a little crazy on what I think white should be able to do. But we have to figure out what's going on, because they're hinting at stuff that white and Boros can do that is making them a little bit better. But we haven't gotten the full picture yet. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Do you think I'm getting close to what white needs? Or do you think that maybe I'm just completely out of my gourd and I'm like talking crazy talk, and my thoughts are would completely destroy the color pie and ruin the game? Just be gentle if that's the case. I'm not trying to ruin the game. It was just more of a thought that I had on what would help mono white a little bit, because like I said, I stand by this. I feel like mono white is good on ramp. It's just that it needs a way to get to the ramp. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Maybe, or if you have a slightly different idea or a different approach to what I was getting at, maybe let me know down in the comments so I can, see what everybody else is kind of thinking. But till then, I will see you guys next video.